Okay, games for the Vectrex. We're gonna start with the first one, with the built-in one, Mindstorm, which, like I mentioned before, is a clone a variation of the arcade game Asteroids. It is a shooter where you have to clear the screen from all the objects like asteroids, mines, and also sometimes of UFOs. You have a fire button, a thrust button and an escape button, which you can use in emergencies, and it will transport or teleport your ship to another location or section on the screen, but in the end it's totally random, so you never know where you're gonna appear next. It's a pretty cool game. It's actually one of my favorite games for the Vectrex, and I think it's very cool that the built-in one is actually one of the best games that you can get for the Vectrex. And it's very challenging, which is normal since it is based on an arcade game, and most of the games that were released for the Vectrex are conversions from the arcades, so a lot of the games are very challenging. And yeah, GCE got most of the licenses for those arcade conversions from a company called Cinematronics, but they also got some other licenses from Konami and Namco too. And you're gonna notice sometimes a flickering on the screen, which happens if a lot of stuff is going on the screen, and sometimes it can cause also some slowdowns. And there will be some examples later on where you can see this effect a little bit more. And I'm gonna mention it when it happens again. Now we come to the next game, Star Castle, another shooter. There were many shooters released for the Vectrex, and yeah, also in this one you have to, yeah, it's more a high score game. And the goal in this game is to make it through the energy walls and destroy the target in the middle, the ship in the middle, and yeah, avoid enemy projectiles and enemy ships in the end. Again, it's a very challenging game. It's a pretty cool game, but it's not one of my favorites because it is such a challenging game. Now we come to the next game, Star Trek, another shooter, this time from a first-person perspective, and like I also mentioned before, the game was called Starship in Europe. It's a very cool game where, yeah, in the end you also have to clear the screens, or actually the sections / levels from enemy ships. Here now I fight against Klingon ships, and every time those ships shoot at me I can raise my shields, but you always have, which you can see down on the bottom of the screen, one energy bar for your lasers and one energy bar for your shields, and you also have one button which is called Power Link, and with this one you can either dock on one of the space stations and refill your energy bars if they are actually in those areas, and sometimes you can see some kind of a wormhole, and with the Power Link you can access this wormhole, and this brings you to the end boss. In the end, I also think it's a pretty cool title for the Vectrex. Next we have Blitz, a football game, one of the few sports games for the Vectrex. And yeah, actually I'm not that huge when it comes to sports games, especially not football games on a video game system. It's a pretty basic game in terms of graphics, because here, as you can see, the X's are playing against the squares, and I play Team X, or the X-Men if you wanna call them. It's pretty tough. I mean, yes, you have some options and you can change the starting positions and everything, but in the end it's really tough to, or at least for me, because I didn't play it much, to make a point in this game, because the enemy defense, the character or the player that is played by the computer, has twice the speed than my player, and if you make some passes you really have to be very precise, because you can't throw the ball over other players. I personally don't like this game that much, but I'm not a huge fan in the end when it comes to football games, American football games, on a video game system or on a computer. Now we come to the next game, Starhawk, another shooter for the Vectrex. And yes, it also reminds me of the Death Star trench scene from Star Wars. And in the end, yes, you try to shoot down as many ships as possible while the clock runs out. You start with 60 seconds, and after each time you reach 10,000 points, you get another 20 seconds, and in the end you try to make as much points as possible. It's cool, but it's not a great game, I would say. I mean, you can't die or anything, it's just a time attack mode, let's call it like that. And this is also one thing, a lot of games on the Vectrex have, like, for instance, the games for the Atari 2600s, sometimes some different game modes that you can select in the beginning of the game, and those game modes can change in terms of difficulty, or sometimes that, yeah, you have different levels, or that you have different things to do in those levels. Here we have the next game, Spike, a very interesting and unique game for the Vectrex. Number one, it's the only platforming game for the Vectrex, and number two, this game actually has digitized speech. And yeah, it's a pretty cute game in the end. At the start of every level, your girlfriend Molly gets kidnapped, and you, Spike, have to save her, and in the end you have to find the key for the cage in each level, and you have to make it to the top after you've collected the key, and jump to the cage. And progressing during the game, you also will encounter some enemies, and you can also defend yourself with kicks. And yeah, it's a pretty cute game, and like I said, it's a very unique game because it uses digitized speech. Now the next game is Space Wars, another shooter, and yeah, this was one of the very first arcade games that were ever released. It's also a very cool conversion. The only differences between this version and the original arcade version is that in the arcade version the sun in the middle had gravity, and you would always be pulled towards the sun. So in this version there is no gravity, but except for this, it's actually a very good version of the game Space Wars. And what I also like is, number one, the ship of player one looks like the Enterprise from Star Trek, and the fact that besides you have limited fuel and limited energy for your lasers, one hit doesn't mean actually that you lose a round, because your ship consists out of 4 parts, and as long as the main part, the cancel, is not destroyed, you can still continue with the game. So it's a pretty interesting game, at least for me, and I think it's also fun. Okay, now we come to the next game, Berserk, a very cool game, actually one of my favorite games on the system, where you have to clear the screen or try to destroy as many robots as possible, and avoid everything in terms of you can't touch anything. And also Evil Otto, a smiley face, is chasing you after you've spent a while at one screen. And it's a very good conversion from the arcades, and it makes a lot of fun. And it's, in the end, it's also just a high score game, but this is actually one of my favorite games for the Vectrex. And here you can also see that, yeah, if many things are on the screen, there are some slowdowns and the screen starts to flicker. So this is also one game that really shows you sometimes the limitations of the system. And now we come to the next game, Flipper Pinball, the only pinball game for the Vectrex. And this is also one game that has a lot of flickering going on, because there is a lot going on the screen, especially later on when I get the multi-ball. You will see a lot of flickering, and it will really slow down. For a pinball game, yeah, I would say for an 8-bit pinball game it's pretty good, but it's, if you are used to more advanced pinball games, then it's not that great anymore. But I still like it, especially because it's the only pinball game for the Vectrex, so it's actually not bad. Now to the next game, Armor Attack, another shooter for the Vectrex. I can't tell you much about the game because yeah, it is a shooter, and again you try to make as many points as possible for the high score, and yeah, you try to avoid enemy projectiles, and yeah, you try to make as many points as possible. The only thing that I don't like that much is that aiming is very sensitive since it uses the analog stick, and sometimes it can be hard to yeah, actually hit some of the enemy targets, like for instance the tanks. So yeah, I think it's a good game, not one of my favorites, but yeah, I would still recommend it for shooter fans. Next we have Hyper Chase, one of the few racing games for the Vectrex. Yeah, you have to avoid everything, the side of the roads and also of course the other cars. And yeah, this is also one of those games that has a couple or two game modes, and this is the first game mode where you drive against the clock and you try to make as many points slash you try to go the furthest as possible in terms of distance before the time runs out. I think it's a good game, it really has some nice graphics, but yeah, it's not one of my favorite games for the Vectrex. Next we have Cosmic JSON. This is a pretty cool game, and this is also a special game because this was first released on the Vectrex and later on it was actually ported to the arcades. This was also part of the deal with Cinematronics, that if they create games that they had the right to port this game to the arcades. And in the end what you have to do in this game is yeah, you have to make it into the middle cave of the level, and there you have to set an explosive and blow up the reactor, I guess, in the middle of this level, and you drive around with a drill that can also shoot, and yeah, with the lasers you can destroy the enemies, but you always have to use the drill bit to make it to another tunnel. It's a pretty cool game, very unusual, or at least for me a little unusual for a Vectrex game, but it's a really cool game that I would highly recommend. Next we have Pole Position, another racing game for the Vectrex. This is a very good conversion from the arcades. It looks good, it plays very good, and yeah, this game is really one of my favorite games for the Vectrex. But sadly, it is also one of the rarest and more expensive games that you can find or get for the Vectrex. But again, I would highly recommend it. Next we have Solar Quest. This is also a shooter. At first it looks like Space Wars, but in the end it's a little bit different. Also here you have the sun in the middle, there's no gravity, at least not for your ship, but if you shoot down the other enemy ships, they will lose their cargo, and you have to collect that cargo, or it would be better so that you would get more points for it than shooting the cargo. And you also have some kinds of proton torpedoes or whatever, and again you have to make as many points as possible and avoid colliding with other spaceships. It's okay, but it's not one of my favorite games. So next we have Pola Rescue, also another rare game and also a very unusual game. The first thing is you play from a first-person perspective. You are in a submarine and you try to rescue people from, I guess, either submarine wrecks or yeah, some kinds of facilities. And while you are traveling to their location, you have to avoid yeah, enemy submarines, then water mines, and also some big chunks of ice. And if you get close to one of those shipwrecks, then yeah, this docking scene will appear, and it's very hard to yeah, or at least for me it was very tough to manage to dock on to this shipwreck or whatever it is, or submarine wreck, and rescue those people. And if you manage this, then you progress to the next level. It's a very unusual but cool game in my opinion. It also has some nice visuals, and I guess some people would really appreciate this game, but I know it's not for everybody. And lastly, I'm gonna show you now the light pen in action. First, I show you Artmaster, and Artmaster has 3 options: sketch, connect, and animation, or animated. And now I'm gonna do a sketch. It is very tough to draw freehand, especially on the Vectrex, since it's hard to make round shapes and curves. And yeah, here I try to draw Garfield, or at least a rough version of Garfield. And yeah, the sensitivity of the light pen is good, but it's not excellent, and also the recognition of your movements. It is you are able to draw with the light pen and with the Artmaster, but it's not that easy. And now I'm gonna do connect, and connect, yeah, you basically draw with dots, and you can use this mode for yeah, a guessing game if you have a second person with you, or a second player if you want to say it, and you can draw something and the other player has to guess what you are drawing. It's a little bit easier to draw curves with the connect option. And yeah, this is a very, very crude painting of Homer Simpson. And now I'm gonna make an animation. This is also a little bit different because you can't draw freely, because you have to really draw everything just with one dot. So you hold the light pen and then you push the button 1 to make one dot, and yeah, so on. And then you can connect those dots with lines. So it's very, very tough to make any circle shapes or curves in this mode. But anyways, I still tried my best, and I made a very crude animation of, yeah, a boxer training, let's call it like that. But in the end, it's a pretty cool program. And one downside about Artmaster is you can't save your drawings or your animations. And you only have 9 frames available for your animation. But in the end, they released also the other program called Anim Action. So this is a more advanced animation program than this one. But again, I think it's, for a program, it's actually not bad. And now I'm gonna show you Melody Master in action. And you have at first 2 options, music and game. First I've chosen game, and you have 2 different games. The first game is that, yeah, the system will play a note and you have to repeat this note. And if you manage that, then it plays 2 different notes, and so on and so on. And in the first game mode, you actually see the notes, and later on I'm gonna show you the second game mode, and in the second game mode you only hear the notes. And so it's a little bit harder than the first mode. And the last option is music, and in music you can compose your own melody. And yeah, you have basically 3 channels available, 2 for the voices and 1 for rhythm. And in the voices you can yeah, you can decide to turn on or off the voices. Then you can decide if if you want to play piano or flute, if those are soft or loud. And in the end, while composing or creating a melody, you also have some extra options, for instance, where you can change the note values or the rests. So it's actually a pretty advanced program, especially for an 8-bit system. And yeah, if you're into music and you have a Vectrex or you want to get a Vectrex, it's really a great program for the Vectrex, and I was actually surprised how advanced this program actually is. So I think it's pretty cool, and I actually would recommend it, even though I can't play any music instrument or whatsoever, and I actually have nothing really to do with music, composing or whatever, and I still had fun with this program. So it's actually pretty cool for the Vectrex Melody Master. Okay, now that you have seen some of the games that I have for the system, let's come to the last couple of things that I want to talk about. First, what is my verdict about the Vectrex? I think for back in the days, for 1982, the system is amazing, or was amazing, and still today I think it's a cool system, and yeah, it's a cool collector's item. For back in the day, for 1982, the system was small, it was portable, you could actually take it on vacation, especially if you were traveling with a car. Then, yeah, graphically and everything, the system was kind of futuristic. It was also future-oriented, especially because of the accessory that was released, like the 3D glasses, which were the first one for a video game system, and also the light pen, and also the other stuff that would have been released, like the floppy disk and the keyboard add-on and so on. Then I would also say it was kind of family friendly, because especially in the early 80s, a lot of families, mine included, only had one TV in the living room, and the system already had a monitor built in to it, so you could put it in the kids' room or in the room of the kids. Then you could also put it in the living room, dining room, whatever, and you don't have to ask your parents if it was okay to play now your video game system, because at least it was in my during my childhood this way with me and my brother. Every time we wanted to play, let's say, the Atari 2600, we always had to ask our parents, is it okay that we play now our system, because we need the TV, and a lot of times we get a no from our parents, because we get some company, or they wanted to watch the news or some other video or whatever. So this was also, in my opinion, a very good point for the system, and also I think for 1982 this was the best home arcade experience that you actually could get. The only other video game system that I know of that had such a similar quality in terms of getting a home experience of arcade games was the Neo Geo AES, in my opinion. So I think for back in the day it was an amazing system, and today I still think it's awesome. And that brings me to my next thing, or next point. Would I recommend the system? Definitely, I would highly recommend the system, but sadly, I would only recommend it for the most part to collectors, because today it is a very expensive system, and also to get all the games, or most of the games, and also accessories. But I would also say that I would highly recommend I would highly recommend the system to every gamer, that if you have the chance, please try out the Vectrex and get a real Vectrex experience, because like I mentioned before, it is totally different to watch a recording of the Vectrex, of the gameplay and the graphics, than if you play the system for real. You're gonna notice the quality of the screen is higher than you can actually see in the videos. And yeah, just to check out the Vectrex experience. And I know a lot of people who will play the Vectrex for the first time will fall in love and they just wanna buy a Vectrex the next day. But in the end, yeah, like I said, it is a very expensive system. I'm gonna tell in just a minute the prices that you can expect on eBay, for instance. There are some other ways. If you already have a Vectrex system, or if you wanna don't spend that much of money for the Vectrex library, for instance, then you can get the so-called multi-cards and flash cards for the Vectrex, where there are a couple of different versions out there from those cards. And the advantage of those cards is that most of the cards either have, or you are able to get all, the entire library of Vectrex games for this multi-card, and also a lot of homebrews, and basically play all the games with just one cartridge. The big downside of those multi-cards or flash cards is that you don't have the overlays, which, yeah, in the end, for me, I need the overlays because they add a lot to the game, and I want to have complete games in the end. But it is possible to get all the games for the Vectrex on one card, and also a lot of the homebrews. And one other way to get not the real Vectrex experience, but a very close experience, is there is a game app or a downloadable app out there for iOS systems called Vectrex Regeneration. And yeah, I would say it's an emulator, Vectrex emulator, a very good one as far as I've seen. And I don't know how much you have to spend for this, but it costs a little bit. And it comes with a couple of games, I guess also with a couple of commercials, and also with overlays, and you can either use the overlays or don't use the overlays. And you can also buy the rest or the entire library, plus also a lot of the homebrews for this emulator. I've seen it on the internet in some videos. It looks pretty cool, but it's also not the real Vectrex experience. But this is also another way to enjoy Vectrex games. Okay, but now let's come to some of the prices that you can expect if you are interested in buying a Vectrex or the games or accessories. And I'm gonna read off my notepad. So for a Vectrex system, you can expect to pay between, let's say, 80 to 450 US dollars, depending of course on if it comes with box, with manual, with overlays, which condition, and so on and so on. The light pen, for instance, yeah, for the light pen you have to pay between 40 to 200, 220 US dollars, exactly the same also with condition and everything. The 3D imager, yeah, you have to pay at least, or that was the cheapest that I've seen so far, 150 to 900 US dollars. The 3D glasses or 3D imager is not cheap. Then for the controller, you can expect to pay between, let's say, 30 to 130 US dollars. That was also the reason why I mentioned it earlier, that in some cases controller in good condition can cost more than a working Vectrex system. And in terms of games, if you only buy the cards only, you can expect to pay prices between 1 to 70 US dollars. 70 US dollars are the more rare games. And if you wanna have complete games, then you can expect to pay between 7 to 90 US dollars for the most games of the library. For some rarer games, like for instance the programs for the light pen, the 3D games, and those three games, Pole Position, Pola Rescue and Star Castle, those games can reach a lot higher prices. They can reach prices up to, yeah, let's say 200-250 US dollars, but in the end it depends yeah, on the condition, of course, and also how much people are willing to bid and drive up the prices on eBay, for instance. And the last two cartridges, the extremely rare Mr. Boston, for instance, and also the Mindstorm, the fixed version, the Mindstorm cartridge. The Mindstorm cartridge, as far as I know, can reach prices between 100 to 450 US dollars, and the Mr. Boston clean sweep, yeah, as far as I know, if it's just the cartridge alone can reach prices between 800 to 1,200 US dollars, and I've found two examples of yeah, Mr. Boston clean sweeps that were sold on eBay with cartridge and overlay, and the first bidding ended with 1,500 US dollars and the second one with 3,600 US dollars, which I personally think is a ridiculous price, but in the end someone was willing at least to bid on it. I don't know if it actually sold, but those are some of the prices that you can expect to pay for Vectrex games and system games and accessory. Okay, the last thing that I want to mention before I'm gonna end this review is, if you are interested in homebrew stuff, homebrew video games, accessories, then I would highly recommend that you check out the channel of a reviewing colleague of mine who is also from Austria. His name is Vectrex Roli. He's also called Roland, and if you don't already know his channel, he had made a lot of reviews about the Vectrex, the games, a lot of homebrew games. He sorry, he reviewed also a lot of the homebrew games that are available, also of the multi-cards. He has one or even two of the 3D imager, and he also reviewed this one. He also reviewed, and he has one of the 3D imager that were made by the homebrew community, and he also makes a lot of other reviews. In the end, he makes almost the same reviews that I do, also about retro video games, about handheld games, systems, tabletop games, old computer systems, video game consoles. So if you don't already know Vectrex Roli and you are interested especially in the homebrew stuff for the Vectrex, then I would highly recommend that you check out his channel, maybe also subscribe to him if you don't already know him. And yeah, this brings me now to the end of my review. I really hope you enjoyed the show. Maybe see you next time. Take care. Bye.